Hey everybody, it's Rob here at etrailer.com, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Roadmaster Bulb and Socket Kit on our 2020 Chevrolet Equinox. Now our bulb and socket kit is going to allow us to transfer the light signals from our motorhome and put them at the back of our Equinox. That way whenever we're towing it, we can get down the road safely and everybody knows whether we're going to change lanes, we're slowing down, or anything like that. Now keep in mind, this is only going to be one component of a full safe flat tow setup. To completely flat tow your Equinox down the road, you're going to need a base plate, a tow bar to hook up to your base plate, safety cables, your tow bar wiring, and a braking system. Now you can find all of those and the wide variety of different options that we carry here at etrailer.com. And the light you see lighting up inside of our taillight here is actually the new bulb. We're going to be putting a new bulb into our taillight housing, and the benefit of that is it's going to completely bypass our Equinox's electrical system. That way, if there ever is a problem on the motorhome end, it's not connected in any way to our Equinox's electrical system, so we don't have to worry about any kind of backfeeding, short circuits, or anything like that. And the main time I suggest doing a bulb and socket kit opposed to a diode kit is especially if you're not planning on keeping the vehicle for a very long time. Maybe if you're leasing it or you get a new vehicle every few years, it's a lot easier just to replace the taillight lens than it would be to try to start cutting and splicing all the wires back together to remove the diodes. We are going to have to drill a hole to put the new bulb in place, but again, if we ever want to put our Equinox back to stock, we can get a new taillight housing and just replace that and pull the rest of the wiring out. Now on our Equinox, we actually have the Roadmaster Bulb and Socket Kit with incandescent bulbs, but if you'd like to upgrade that, they do have an LED version, which I prefer the LEDs over the incandescents because they are going to last a lot longer and we're not going to have to worry about ever replacing that bulb. Now your bulb and socket kit is going to come with a 4-pole wire as well as a 4-pole connector to mount on the front of your vehicle. However, our customer decided to upgrade to a 6-way connector because he has a few more circuits that he want to add in. Now if you are upgrading to any other style connector, keep in mind you will need to pick up the cable as well, and we have a wide variety of connectors as well as cables here available at etrailer.com. You can get the coiled cable like we have here, which is nice to keep all that slack and everything up off the ground so it's not dragging. But if you have channels in your tow bar, there's also straight cables so you can run it through, again keeping it off the ground and have a really nice look to it. Now that we've seen our bulb and socket working, we've gone over some of the features, let's go ahead and bring our Equinox into the shop. We can go through the installation process together so you can have the confidence to do it at home. To begin our installation, we want to start at the front of our Equinox. Now obviously we don't have our front fascia in place, and that's because we just got done installing our base plate, and now with the fascia off would be the best time to run all your wires and install the rest of your components because everything is open and really easily accessible. But we'll start with our wiring at the front. We want to leave a little bit of excess so that we can actually wire up everything and have some room to get everything back in place. But I started routing my wire along the edge of the base plate here, just using some zip ties to put it in place. And then once I got to the edge here, I went underneath and I started routing it towards the back. But again, you want to make sure you use enough zip ties to make sure everything's secure. I went right over the subframe brace here, went underneath the front axle, making sure to keep all my wires away from any moving parts. Went under the steering, came right over the subframe brace, and then I started running it along these factory lines here. Now fortunately for us, we have this cover, keep it nice and protected. Came out from under the cover, and I started routing it up along the outside edge of the fuel tank here, over the rear subframe brace. Again, just want to find something to tie it to so that wiring's not going to be moving around too much. And then finally I have my last anchor point. There's a couple holes in the frames that I used just so it'll keep it high and up off the exhaust. Now we should have a good amount of excess wire left. And what we want to do is we want to cut the end of our plug off here, and we want to pull each one of these wires so that we have 4 separate wires, and you want to go as high up to that last anchor point as you can. And once you have that cut off, again, you just kind of pull on the wires. So we have 4 separate ones to work with. So we want to move up top and open up our hatch now. Now on the inside of our hatch, we're going to have these 2 plugs. Those are going to be covering up the bolts that are holding our taillight in place. So we can take a flat blade screwdriver. Just want to come underneath that little cap. We'll pop it out, and then I'll expose the bolt for the top and the bottom. Sometimes it's going to be a little stubborn. But we want to grab a T15 Torx bit. We're going to pull both of those bolts out. And once you have both of the bolts out, you want to grab your taillight, but I do want to mention there we have some alignment pins on the side, so we don't want to twist too much side to side, maybe a little bit just to kind of work it loose. But you're going to want to grab from behind it and pull straight back as much as you can. And then I'll bring us to the connectors on the back. I want to go ahead and just take our bulb out. Then we can push in on this tab here, slide the connector out, and we'll set the taillight aside for now, and we'll go to the other side and pull the other one out. Now I went ahead and marked out the spot on the back of our taillight that we're going to have to drill so we can get our new bulb in place. Now if we come right where our brake light bulb is, the large black socket, and we move over, you're going to see a little oval circle in it, and there's also going to be a little GM next to it. We want to drill right in the center of that oval hole. Now you don't want to come too far over to the side because that's going to make the bulb too close to the lens, but we also don't want our 2 bulbs touching the factory one and the new one, so right there in the center of where that oval hole is where we should drill. And we need to drill a 1-inch hole, so we're going to use a hole saw. That way we can have a nice clean cut hole. But first I'm going to start with my pilot bit. And again, I'm going to go right in the center. Just take your time. Make sure it's lined up because we can't undrill this hole. Now again, I'm going to be using a 1-inch hole saw, but if you look, most hole saws have pretty aggressive teeth on them, and we really don't want it skipping around, hopping around. So I'm actually going to run this in reverse, going left, and it'll cut right through, especially since it is just plastic. You just want to make sure and try to get as much of those shavings and filings out of there, and try not to drop that center piece inside because it can be very difficult to get all of that out of there. So we can take our new bulb, and you're going to notice real quickly that it actually will not hold itself in there, but that's okay. You're going to flip it over, and all these little tabs, we just want to bend them out just a little bit. That'll provide us a little bit of tension. And they're almost spring-loaded type of tabs. So once we press it in, it'll have just enough tension to hold it in place and kind of lock it in. Just go around, bend all these up just slightly. Take our bulb, press it in. You can see it's nice and snug now. It's not going to come out. But you are going to notice that it's not exactly flush and there's some exposed areas there. You want to make sure you come back with some silicone and seal all of this up around the socket and the back of the wires here, because we don't want any water to get inside, potentially cause any water getting inside the lens or shorting out our light. We're going to let that silicone dry. We're going to grab our other taillight and repeat that entire process. So now that we have our bulbs in our taillights, we need to get our wires up here so we can make our connections. Now, the easiest way that I've found is if you take a piece of airline tube, a coat hanger, something as a pulling device, we're going to feed it between the fascia and the body here. And we want to go all the way down so we can get access to it underneath the bumper. Now it should pop out. You may have to reach underneath. Ours is actually right above the exhaust here. So we pull our airline tube out. You just want to make sure that you don't pull it out all the way from the top. And make sure your wire doesn't fall back down all the way either. Just kind of put a little loop in there, catching on that plastic piece. But we want to grab our wires, and out of the four, we want to grab the white, brown, and yellow wire. We can leave the green wire underneath for now. We want to grab the other three. We're going to find the end of our wires, and we're going to attach it to that airline tube so we can pull it up and get all the slack up into the taillight housing area. Just take a little bit of electrical tape, tape it to the end of my pull wire, and then just grab the airline tube and start pulling all that slack up top. Now you do want to get all of the slack up here. You don't want to leave a loop or anything else. And then once you do get it up, what I like to do is we have our factory wiring anchored to the body. So I'm just going to take this bundle and zip tie it nice and taut. That way if it does come loose, at least it'll be loose up here and we can get our taillight in and out, but we don't have to worry about all of our wire falling back down. We can grab our driver's side taillight now, and we want to strip back the end of each one of these wires. Now on the driver's side taillight over here, we're going to start with our red wire. We're going to crimp on a blue butt connector, slide it over, crimp it down. I always like to give it a quick tug, make sure it actually holds. And then for our black wire and our brown wire, we're going to grab the yellow butt connector out of our kit. Crimp them in place. Now we want to bring our taillight over to the taillight area, the taillight housing area. And just so we have enough room, we really don't want to try to balance everything like this or dangle it from the bulbs. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to estimate about how much wire I need to really get the taillight out, which this should be more than enough. And we're going to trim all three of our wires right about here, but you want to hold on to the excess of the brown and the white wire. So now we can strip back the ends of our three wires here and the ends of the excess wire that we just cut off. I will let you know that the 4-pole wire that we ran, it has this plastic sheathing on there, and sometimes it doesn't really want to strip because it tries to pull the plastic off. So kind of just have to have some patience, make sure you get enough of that weather stripping pulled off so that we can actually make our connections. So we're going to take the free end of the brown wire and the brown wire coming up. We're going to combine those wires together, and these are going to go into the butt connector that's on our taillight for the brown wire. We'll make sure you get both of those wires in there, and we'll crimp it down. And then our red wire coming out of our taillight, we're going to take our yellow wire and crimp it into that connector. Then finally on the black wire, we want to grab our white wire and the excess white wire and do the same thing and crimp those in place. And that's the main reason for these yellow butt connectors, because we do have to get both the wires inside of there. So it just makes it a lot easier to put two wires in that connector rather than trying to cram them into those smaller blue ones. But this is what it should look like on your driver's side. We should have our brown wire going into the bulb, and then we should have a free wire coming off of that, a yellow wire going into the red wire, and then again a white wire going into the black one with another free wire coming off of it. Go ahead and plug in our bulbs and put our taillight loosely back in place. And again, this is kind of the main reason why I like to give myself excess wire, so that we can still get our taillight out if we ever have to service anything. Before we put the actual light back in, we want to grab the excess white and brown wire, and we actually want to drop it down to the bottom so that we can meet up with our green wire underneath. And then we can just find the end of it and start feeding all the slack down below. You can always meet up with the other wires later once we get our taillight back in place. And the excess wires can all just get tucked down in that little pocket, so they're not going to interfere with anything. And again, we'll just line up our taillight, get it put back in place. And on the driver's side, we can put those fasteners back, clip the taillight back in. So whenever we sent our white wire down, we met up, we had our brown and white wire and the green wire run over the top of the bumper structure, ran it along the back end here, actually tying it above our hitch so it's nice and tight up out of the way. And then we use that same method with that pull wire to pull our white, green, and brown wires into the taillight pocket. Now we have most of it hooked up over here. Your green wire is going to go to the red wire on the socket. Brown wire is going to go to the brown wire. So our white wire here is going to go to the black wire on the socket. And you'll notice that I actually have another white tail coming out of it, and that's because it's going to be our ground. So we want to take the ring terminal out of our kit and strip the end of our wire back and crimp that ring terminal on. And then in your kit, you're also going to get a self-tapping screw. So I'm going to take that self-tapping screw and a 5/16 nut driver. I'm actually going to move all my wiring out of the way. And right about here, I kind of want to stay away from those pins, but if you go inside the taillight housing, you should have a nice flat spot right about here. And go ahead and drill that screw right into the body. Now we have our hole made. Pull that screw out. Slide the ring terminal over the screw, and then secure it down. Make sure it's nice and snug. Whenever you do tighten it down, you want to make sure that ring terminal doesn't start spinning on you, but you don't want to strip out the screw either. And then we can just reinstall the bulbs and the fasteners, put the taillight back in place. So we're wiring in our 6-way, but obviously we can't do that with our 4-pole connector still installed. So we want to cut the wires so that we have 4 individual wires coming out. Get rid of the connector, and we want to strip back the ends of all the wires here, the 4-pole as well as our charge line wire. So now we can grab our 6-pole. We want to take the rubber boot off the back of it. Take all of our wires, make sure they go into the small hole And we'll slide the boot just out of the way for now. We can just kind of tuck it back so we have room to work. Now if we bring our attention to the back of the terminal, you're going to see that each one of those terminals are labeled. We're going to start at the top here. The top one's going to be labeled TM for trailer marker. That'll be our brown wire. If we go counterclockwise, the next one's going to be GD for ground. That'll be our white wire. LT for left turn. This will be the yellow wire. RT for right turn. That'll be our green wire. And then finally, the last terminal on the outside, this one's going to be labeled S. That's for your electric brake. And then the center pin is going to be your 12-volt power source or their auxiliary power source. So we want to make sure we put our red wire in the center pin, but I'm going to go ahead and get a small Phillips head screwdriver. We'll loosen up one of the terminals. We'll go ahead and start with the one on top. Now I suggest you don't pull these terminals all the way out because the screws are very small, very easy to lose. But since that's the trailer marker terminal, we'll take our brown wire, put it inside the terminal. And I like to leave just a tiny bit of the copper showing on the top. That way I don't have to worry about any kind of connection issues from the insulation inside the terminal. Just want to tighten it up, make sure nothing's sticking out to where it's going to cross over, cause any arcing. And we're just going to go through and hook up the rest of our wires until we have them all in place. Now once you have all your wires hooked up, what I like to do is actually fill the inside of this area with silicone. It's going to prevent any kind of moisture from getting inside and any corrosion from building up. So just come in and I'm going to fill the back of the plug. Then we can slide our boot right over the end of it. Slide the boot over the edge. We can even come in and backfill our plug up. Make sure we're not going to have any kind of moisture or corrosion issues. I went ahead and put some electrical tape on the back of the boot and up the wire a little bit. It's going to help protect the wires, keep that boot sealed up, and hopefully, again, prevent any kind of moisture from getting inside. We can line up our plug on the front of our base plate. I'm just going to use a couple self-tapping screws to secure the plug to those posts. So I went ahead and hooked up my Equinox to my tester so we can make sure that our bulb and socket kit is going to work properly. Now if I turn on my tester, we can see that the taillight function is coming on. The left turn signal is working. Our brake lights. And finally our right turn signal. So now that we know that our circuits are working properly, we can put the front fascia back on our Equinox and continue installing all the other components for our flat toe setup.